So let's talk about mixtures. Chemistry, we deal with substances that are very rarely, if ever, found as a pure substance. Most things in nature, most matter in nature is found as a mixture. A mixture is a physical blend of at least two substances, and they have variable composition. That means the composition of the two substances are different. There's two types of mixtures. The first type is a heterogeneous mixture. This is when the mixture is not uniform in its composition. It's not the same thing throughout. You can see the differences in a heterogeneous mixture. A good example I like to say is a chocolate chip cookie. You can see the chocolate separate from the cookie. You could pick it out by hand with little tweezers if you had to. You could separate them. Gravel and soil are also examples of heterogeneous mixtures. You could see big rocks and little rocks and maybe sand mixed in with dirt or little twigs in the soil. The second type of mixture is called a homogeneous mixture. This is a mixture that has the same composition throughout. It looks the same. It's uniform in composition. You can't tell the differences apart. There's a synonym for a homogeneous mixture called a solution. Those two words mean the same thing, so I'm going to try to use them interchangeably. Try to remember that whenever I say solution, I mean a homogeneous mixture. A good example of a homogeneous mixture would be something like Kool-Aid. If you make Kool-Aid, you're mixing water and sugar and the flavoring packet, but when you mix it all up real well, you can't tell the difference between the water molecules and the sugar molecules. It's just mixed so evenly, molecule by molecule. It just looks like one solid red solution. Same thing with salt water in the ocean. If you go to the ocean and you get a cup of salt water, you can't tell the salt, particles from the water molecules. It all just looks like water. It's homogeneous. No matter what mixture we're dealing with, hetero or homogeneous, each part keeps its own properties. It's not that the sugar or the salt disappeared in our homogeneous mixture. It just dissolved and really small, and it mixed really thoroughly with all the other parts. But it's still salt and it's still water. It didn't chemically change. It's just physically combined. So remember, a homogeneous mixture is a solution. Each molecule is mixed molecule by molecule, so it's too small to see the different parts. This can occur between any state of matter. You can have a solid and a liquid, like salt and water, or you can have a liquid and a liquid, like water and alcohol mixed together as a homogeneous mixture. You can even have a solid mixed with a solid, like in metal alloys. So determining whether it's a homogeneous or a heterogeneous mixture is based on the distribution of the components. Mixtures are called homogeneous or heterogeneous just based on whether you can see the differences between the parts or you can't see the differences between the parts. So here's an example question I want you to try. Pause the video, try to answer it, and I will go over it when you're done. Okay, 2 grams of potassium chloride are completely dissolved in a sample of water in a beaker. This solution can be classified as what? So choice 1, an element. I don't think so. An element is just one element off the periodic table. We have potassium, we have chloride, which is an ion of chlorine, and we have water, which is made of hydrogen and oxygen. So we have much more than an element. Okay, then we have a compound. It's not a compound either. We actually have 2 compounds. Potassium chloride is an example of a compound, so is water. So this is obviously down to homo or heterogeneous mixtures. And the question you need to ask yourself is, when I mix potassium chloride in water, and the question says it's completely dissolved, can I see the differences between the components of the mixture, or can I not see the differences? Does it just look like one thing? And of course, if it's completely dissolved, it's all going to just look like liquid, which would make it a homogeneous mixture, not a heterogeneous mixture. Another thing you need to know about mixtures is how to separate them. So in chemistry, we like to deal with matter, and matter is often found in mixtures, but we like to deal with pure substances sometimes in chemistry. So we need to know how to separate mixtures into their component parts. So one of the ways that we can do this is by using differences in the physical properties of the components of the mixture. So the first way is filtration. This is when you separate a solid from a liquid in a heterogeneous mixture by size. So here I have a liquid of some orange-ish liquid, and I have this precipitate in this. I have a solid. I can't really see it right now because it's mixed in with the liquid. But if I run it through this filter, you can see the liquid falls through the bottom and the solid gets caught in the filter because it's separated by size. The solid's too big to go through the little holes in the filter. Here's another view of what's going on. So you can see here the filter, which looks solid, actually has these little holes, and the water molecules, which are the blue spheres, can slip through the holes, but the orange particles, our solid precipitate in the filter, cannot, and that's why it gets stuck in the filter. Another method you should know that can separate mixtures is called chromatography. You may remember this from biology. You've done a chromatography lab in Regents Biology. This is a method that's used to separate homogeneous mixtures based on molecular size or some other property, such as polarity. So here's an example. If you have a strip of paper here and you put a little ink spot on the bottom of the paper and put it in some sort of solvent like water, what happens is the water travels up the piece of paper and it takes with it the various components in the heterogeneous mixture, which was the dye. And you can see from the picture that what looks like black ink is actually made up of a bunch of different colors. And the yellow ones travel further because they are presumably lighter or something like that. The last method we're going to talk about that we can use to separate mixtures is called distillation. This separates mixtures based on differences in boiling points. So this requires a distillation apparatus, which looks something like this. So we have our homogeneous mixture here in our flask, our distilling flask, and we heat it up with a Bunsen burner. Now, because this is a mixture, it contains two different liquids that have different boiling points, we can measure the temperature with this thermometer, and the vapors coming out at one temperature will be of a different substance than the liquid that's still in the container. So if the vapors that are blowing out, the ones we want to collect, they're going to travel down this tube into this condenser, which is just a glass tube that has cool water running in one side and running out the other. It cools down that vapor and condenses it to a liquid. It collects on the side of the condenser and it rolls downhill into this receiving flask. And this liquid that we've collected here over whatever range of temperature we're at is a different substance in the homogeneous mixture than what is still in our distilling flask. So, to summarize things here, a mixture is a physical blend of two or more substances. It doesn't mean it's chemically combined. You haven't done a chemical reaction. You've just physically blended or mixed two different things together. There's two types of mixtures. There's a homogeneous mixture, which we call solutions, and you need to remember that they look uniform. That means they all look like the same thing, one solid substance. And then we have a heterogeneous mixture. These do not look uniform. You can see the differences in a heterogeneous mixture, and you could pick them apart and separate them by hand if you had to. Mixtures can be separated usually by physical means, and then once they're separated, we can use those pure substances to study further in the laboratory. Hope that makes sense, and if you have any questions, please let me know.